Many years ago lived a woman named Moremi. Moremi lived in a very small village with her daughter Ayomide. Moremi had a small leather workshop in the village where she made leather bags, shoes and other leather works. She worked in her leather workshop during the day and would still find time to go to the farm with her daughter to harvest some crops for themselves. Moremi was so hardworking but kind to a fault, as every evening when she and her daughter returned from the farm with food items, they barely had enough to eat, as people would always troop to their house to eat the food they prepared. Moremi was so kind-hearted as she never ignored anyone who needed help. Even when she has little, Moremi will still share with those in need, and people began to take advantage of her kindness. One early morning, Moremi heard a knock on her door. When she opened the door, she saw a young man standing outside her house. "How can I help you?" said Moremi, who waited eagerly to hear what the young man had to say. "I am Tunde and I live not too far from your farmland. My father is sick and about to die. I rushed him to the herbalist, and the herbalist has requested for so many items that I cannot afford. I have asked everyone in the village, but no one is willing to help me. Please, you are my only hope." When Moremi heard this, she was greatly touched. She did not have much at that time, but the little she had she gave to Tunde to go save his father. Tunde was so grateful as he thanked Moremi for being so kind to him. When Moremi's daughter Ayomide heard what had happened, she was unhappy as she knew that they barely had enough for themselves. Ayomide was aware of how hard her mother worked and was saddened by the fact that her mother always puts others first, depriving herself of so many things. Her mother then told her that the greatest gift a person has is the ability to help those in need. She went on to say that it is in giving that one receives from God, and Ayomide then understood why her mother was always kind to others. One calm evening, Moremi and Ayomide returned back home from the farm. When they caught sight of Moremi's elder sister Ibukun waiting outside their house. The last time Moremi saw Ibukun was 2 years ago, when Ibukun absconded with some valuables she took from Moremi's house. Ibukun is Moremi's only sister and she is the complete opposite of Moremi. Ibukun is self-centered and inconsiderate as she always looked out for herself alone. She was the reason why Moremi's marriage to Tosin crashed 2 years ago, as she took something that was valuable to Tosin during her last visit, which put him in a lot of trouble in the village. Moremi, in a bid to cover up for her sister Ibukun, fell out with her husband Tosin, and this resulted in a rift that ended their marriage. Since Ibukun left her sister's house 2 years ago, no one saw or heard from her till this day. Moremi was shocked to see her sister Ibukun waiting outside her house. She wondered what could have brought Ibukun to her house after all she did the last time. "What are you doing in my house?" Moremi asked her sister Ibukun, who knelt down and began to plead for forgiveness. "I am so sorry for all the pain I caused you. I am now a changed woman who wants to make peace with my sister." Moremi was heartbroken, but the soft spot she had for her sister Ibukun made it easy for her to forgive. Weeks passed, and Ibukun was still at Moremi's house. Things had gone back to normal, as Ibukun had been well behaved since she came visiting. One evening, Moremi and Ibukun were heading back home from Moremi's leather workshop when they came across a young woman who looked distressed. "Please help me. I have nowhere to go," cried the young woman, who introduced herself as Bolu. Moremi was moved by the young lady's tears and invited her to live with them in their house. Moremi's daughter Ayomide had a really bad feeling about Bolu, but her mother rebuked her for being unwelcoming towards Bolu. Moremi provided shelter and food for Bolu, who looked extremely hungry. Every morning, Bolu would wake up and do all the house chores, as that was the only way she could repay Moremi for her kindness. This went on for a while, till one fateful day. The king of the village was in search of a leather maker who he could trust with his unique ostrich leather. One of his guards heard about this and approached the king, saying that he knew of a certain leather maker who made the finest of bags and shoes in the village. The king then decided to pay this leather maker a visit one afternoon. It happened to be that the man Moremi helped a while ago to save his sick father, Tunde, was the same man who recommended Moremi to the king. When the king got to Moremi's leather workshop, he was amazed at the beautiful items she had created. The king picked great interest in her work and contracted her to make several items for him with his unique ostrich leather. The king of the village only used ostrich leather for all his leather works, and this leather was extremely expensive and scarce. The king told Moremi that if she did an excellent job with his leather, that he would put her in charge of all his leather works. Moremi had never worked with ostrich leather before, but she was determined to make good use of this opportunity to impress the king. Moremi began to work around the clock to make sure that she produced excellent items for the king. Most days, Moremi would return home from her workshop with some of the king's outstanding work to enable her work through the night. She did this to enable her finish the king's work on time, as she had so many items to produce for the king. One morning, Moremi woke up so tired, as she had been awake most of the night working. She had to deliver the king's items to the palace in 2 days, so she was under a lot of pressure at this point. Moremi went into her workspace at home and noticed that the items she had been working on were no longer where she kept them. She screamed in shock and began to panic when her sister Ibukun and daughter Ayomide rushed in to see why she was screaming. "They are all gone!" screamed Moremi in pain. "What is gone?" asked Ibukun, who was trying to understand what was happening. "The king's items are gone. Somebody has stolen them," cried Moremi, who did not know what to do. Ibukun began to console her sister when Ayomide began to scream for Bolu, the young lady who her mother decided to feed and shelter. Ayomide screamed for Bolu 3 times, but Bolu was nowhere to be found. Moremi and Ibukun joined in the search for Bolu as they began to search the house for her, but Bolu was nowhere at this point. They waited all day for Bolu to return, but she never did, and Moremi was so devastated. She was heartbroken as she could not understand why a girl she decided to help would turn back to hurt her deeply. "What will I tell the king?" she said aloud as she began to cry profusely. Ayomide, her daughter, then told her to ask her sister Ibukun for the whereabouts of Bolu. Ibukun acted shocked at Ayomide's accusation when Ayomide went on to reveal to her mother everything that had happened. She told her mother that it was all Ibukun's plan. Ayomide revealed that she returned home one day and was about going into the house when she heard Ibukun and Bolu discussing. Apparently, Ibukun had known Bolu for so many years and knew how kind her sister was. So she planned with Bolu and told her to pretend to be homeless and hungry to enable her gain access to her sister's house. That was how Bolu began to live at Moremi's house. Then, on that fateful day, Ayomide was about to come into the house when she overheard Ibukun and Bolu discussing on how they would steal the king's unique leather from Moremi. The leather was so valuable and they were going to make so much money from it. Ayomide then revealed that she also overheard when Ibukun told Bolu to wait for her by a certain tree close to the village cave. Moremi was so disappointed to hear this, but at this point, she was more focused on retrieving the king's leather from Bolu, so she headed straight to the cave. On getting there, Bolu was nowhere to be found. They searched around but found no one. Ibukun was shocked as what this meant was that Bolu had absconded with the items, leaving her behind with nothing. Ibukun was sad as she now regretted ever plotting with Bolu to steal from her sister. Moremi was extremely devastated as she began to plan on what she would tell the king. Her dream of working for the king was now in jeopardy and Moremi did not know what to do. 2 days later, Moremi decided to go to the king's palace with her sister Ibukun to explain all that happened to the king. When she told the king all that had transpired, the king said nothing as he ordered his guards to take Moremi and Ibukun to the palace dungeon. They began to plead with the king, who uttered no word. The guards took Moremi and Ibukun to the dungeon, and to their surprise, they saw Bolu locked up in the dungeon. Moremi was shocked as she was not expecting to see Bolu at all. The guards then escorted them back to the king's palace. It was there the king told them of how his guards had apprehended Bolu with the king's unique ostrich leather by the cave side. They brought her straight to the king, and when they interrogated her, she revealed how she and Ibukun planned to steal the ostrich leather to sell. This made the king so furious as no one steals from the king and gets away with it. So the king, there and then, ordered his guards to also lock up Ibukun in the dungeon as he rewarded Moremi for the wonderful job she did with the ostrich leather. The king then put Moremi in charge of all his leather works, and Moremi was still in shock on how everything worked out despite all that had happened. Bolu and Ibukun remained in the king's dungeon, and this made them regret all their actions. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should not pay one's kindness with wickedness. Do not make a monster out of a person who has helped you countlessly, even when you are not deserving of the help. and kindness. Quit being selfish all the time, because if everyone decides to be selfish, then there'll be no helpers out there. Be kind to people always, as it has a way of coming back to you. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.